Hello, and welcome to Office Hours with Dr. Dan. I'm Dan. Today's topic is how to ask for a letter of recommendation. And a letter of recommendation is a written appraisal of your suitability for a specific job, internship, graduate program, or scholarship. And first off, you should ask for the letter of recommendation early, something on the order of 2 weeks before the letter is due, earlier if that due date corresponds to some time that's going to be very busy during the semester for the professor, midterms and finals, for an example. Because the more time someone has to write a letter, the odds are the better that letter is going to be. If you ask someone to write you a letter of recommendation the day before,
itu tidak akan untuk menulis surat tersebut dan memberi mereka beberapa minggu. Jika kamu telah meminta seseorang untuk menulis surat rekomendasi dalam waktu singkat, biarkan mereka mengetahui mengapa kamu meminta mereka dalam waktu singkat. Maksud saya, apakah orang lain yang Anda minta surat jaminan dan memutuskan tidak menulisnya, atau karena keluar kota, atau sakit, atau karena tidak bisa menulis surat? Apakah Anda hanya menemukan program tersebut dan ada waktu singkatnya? Jadi, kamu tidak tahu tentang itu 2 minggu sebelumnya. Kamu tidak dapat meminta profesor 2 minggu sebelumnya. Surat orang lain berisi kesalahan tata bahasa ataupun kesalahan pada tanda baca, atau mereka hanya tidak dapat membaca dengan baik, bahwa kamu tidak bisa menggunakan surat tersebut. Jadi, pada intinya, berhati-hatilah dalam meminta seseorang untuk menuliskan surat rekomendasi jika mereka tidak menguasai bahasa Inggris. Ini bukannya merendahkan, tetapi orang lain tidak belajar bahasa Inggris sebagai bahasa pertama bagi mereka. Dan karena itu, jika kamu menulis surat rekomendasi dan saya menyimpan video untuk profesor dengan beberapa tips untuk menulis surat rekomendasi, satu hal yang perlu kamu perlukan untuk membuktikan bahwa surat yang dibaca dengan baik dan benar. Karena orang lain membaca surat jika ada banyak kesalahan terhadap tata bahasa di dalamnya, atau surat itu tidak berjalan dengan baik sebagaimana mestinya, atau siapa yang pernah melamar.
if you'd ask them to write that letter and given them a couple weeks notice. If you have to ask someone for a letter of recommendation on short notice, let them know why you're asking them on short notice. I mean, did someone else that you asked for a letter bail and decide not to write it, or went out of town, or got sick and can't write the letter? Did you just find out about the program and there's a short notice deadline, so you didn't know about it 2 weeks ago, so you couldn't ask the professor 2 weeks ago? Or was another person's letter just so filled with grammatical errors or punctuation errors, or just did not read well, that you can't use that letter? All right. So this brings up the point of be careful asking someone to write you a letter of recommendation if they have not mastered the English language. Now, this is not slamming people whose English is not their first language, because it's just, if you're writing a letter of recommendation, and I put a video up for professors on some tips for writing letters of recommendation, one of the things is you need to make sure that that letter reads well and is correct, because people reading that letter, if there's a bunch of grammatical errors in it or it just doesn't flow right, that's going to be a ding.
Banyak orang di sana, tapi kamu berpartisipasi. Mungkin profesor pun mengetahuinya. Oke, itu orangnya. Itu kamu di baris ketiga. Kamu tahu dengan benar bahwa aku baik-baik saja. Baik itu murid yang berpartisipasi. Jadi, itu membantu profesor untuk memasang wajah dengan sebuah nama. Dan secara tidak langsung bertanya dan meminta, atau tidak lagi secara langsung, setidaknya melalui telepon. memberikan profesor sebuah kesempatan untuk secara cepat memberitahumu bahwa kamu baik-baik saja. Ya, aku akan atau tidak menuliskan surat, dan jika saja akan menulis surat tersebut, disinilah apa yang saya perlukan dari kamu.
So that I can write the letter. And on that note of having things ready for your professor to save everyone time, if you're meeting with them in person, have something to hand them that has the contact information for who the letter needs to be addressed to. I mean, what is, if you know a specific person's name, if it's an organization, how is that letter supposed to be delivered? Does the professor mail it? Do they give it to you? Is it going to be emailed? What position or program are you applying for? So the professor can kind of include that information. And again, professors that have been teaching for a while have a format for letters of recommendation. I mean, so you shouldn't be hesitant to ask for a letter of recommendation for a professor that you've had before. We realize as professors that our students are going to ask us for letters of recommendation, and we know to expect that. But we need to know, is this a letter of recommendation for a job?
Atau magang, atau beasiswa. Saya pribadi, saya biasanya akan meminta kepada murid saya untuk mempersiapkan sebuah draft surat rekomendasi. Jadi, itu termasuk semua informasi. Sejauh informasi mengenai kontak dan hal seperti itu juga biodata singkat, dan saya mungkin memakai beberapa dari apa yang mereka katakan. Saya mungkin menggunakan kontak informasi sama sekali untuk menulis surat, dan bagian dari alasan saya meminta hanya untuk meyakinkan mahasiswa telah serius.
Recommendation, they're asking 6 people, and so they can try to pick and choose the best ones, because that's not fair to the professors who are having to do all these letters of recommendation. So if you need 3 letters of recommendation, ask 3 people for letters of recommendation. And then it's ask, don't demand the letters of recommendation. So it's better to go talk to your professor during office hours, or make an appointment, or if you happen to see him in the hall and they have a few minutes, ask them. It's like, Professor so-and-so, could you write me, or would you write me a letter of recommendation? Not, hey, I need you to write me a letter of recommendation. I mean, there's asking, and then there's almost demanding. Say, hey, I need you to write me a letter of recommendation. Well, depending on your relationship with that professor, that could come off as very demeaning or demanding, and the professor may say no. So, ask nicely. You don't need to grovel or anything like that, but just ask rather than demand. And one of the things to keep in mind is, when you're asking for the letter of recommendation, ask, will they be able to write you a good letter of recommendation? Will they be able to give you a positive recommendation? And if they don't come back immediately with, oh yeah, sure, not a problem, you're a good student, that won't be a problem. If they're kind of hemming and hawing, like, well, I mean, what do you mean by good? Then that's probably a sign that they don't really know you, that they're not really into the project. So you probably need to go ask someone else, because some people just don't like to say no. They don't like to get into a confrontation. If they say no, I won't write you a letter of recommendation, and they might be afraid, oh well, this is going to blow up into something that I don't want. So they may just write you a lukewarm letter of recommendation, and that's not going to do.
Kata ya, lalu kamu harus pergi. Dan yang paling penting, mintalah mereka untuk membawa surat rekomendasi yang bagus. Jika kamu tidak ingin melihat surat sebelum mengirimkannya padaku, secara pribadi, semua orang ketika pernah meminta untuk dituliskan surat rekomendasinya, saya membiarkan mereka untuk melihat bahwa hanya saya, tetapi profesor, tidak melakukannya, dan beberapa dalam sebagian kasus mereka tidak diizinkan pula untuk melakukannya. Jadi, yakinkanlah lagi mereka akan menulisimu sebuah surat yang bagus, surat rekomendasi yang bagus, dan lakukan yang semua orang suka. Kemudian, jangan meminta seseorang menuliskan surat jika kamu tidak mengetahui orang tersebut.
Organization. So if you don't know them from anybody, and there's just, hey, this professor that does consulting for company X. I'm applying for company X. It would be a really great thing if I could get a letter from that professor. And yes, it would be a great thing if you could get a letter from that professor. But if you have no relationship with that professor, meaning you never had them for class, you never were in any kind of organization with them, they don't know you from any other student on campus, they're really not going to be able to write your letter of recommendation. That's not the person you should be asking. The people that you should be asking for letters of recommendation are people who can write something to the people reviewing the letters that is going to tell them something they can't get from just looking at your transcript. What kind of person are you? How do you work in groups? Are you attentive? Do you do your work? Those are things that letters of recommendation are used for. And follow up with the professor a few days.
Katakanlah, hey, apakah kau membutuhkan informasi yang lain untuk surat rekomendasi? Itulah cara yang baik untuk mengguncang memori. Jika mereka lupa dan tanpa mencoba memalukan mereka, katakanlah, oh, kau melupakan surat rekomendasi, dan biarkanlah profesor mengetahui apa hasil yang telah kau dapatkan. Apakah kau mendapatkan pekerjaan, apakah kau mendapatkan beasiswa, dan apakah kau mendapatkan tempat untukmu melakukan magang. Jika kamu menerima program lulusan, kamu tahu profesor suka jika muridnya menjadi sukses, bahwa muridnya mendapatkan manfaat yang baik. Maka biarkanlah profesor tahu apa yang telah kau dapatkan, karena setiap guru, setiap profesor akan sangat bangga dan senang jika mengetahui bahwa murid-muridnya telah sukses